The starship tore through the alien atmosphere, flames licking at its hull as it spiraled toward the ground. Elara gripped her seat with white knuckles, her breath coming in short gasps as the impact alarms blared. Moments later, the ship hit the surface with a deafening crash, throwing her forward as darkness claimed her. When she awoke, the cockpit was a shattered mess of metal and sparking wires. The sharp scent of burnt circuits filled the air. Blood trickled down her forehead, and pain radiated through her body. She checked the ship's emergency systems. No distress signal, no response from the crew. She was alone. Climbing out of the wreckage, Elara surveyed the alien landscape. It was a hauntingly beautiful place, with jagged rock formations glowing faintly under a dark sky. Strange bioluminescent plants swayed in the wind, casting eerie shadows. But the beauty was deceiving. The air was heavy and thin, making each breath a labor. She quickly salvaged what she could, a small toolkit, a ration pack, and a survival knife. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As she limped away from the crash site, the faint sound of something moving caught her attention. She froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the knife. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything she had ever seen, a wolf-like beast, towering at least 12 feet tall at the shoulder. Its body was a strange amalgamation of flesh and machinery. Sleek metallic plating interwove with fur that shimmered with an unnatural sheen, and glowing red eyes locked onto her with an intelligence that sent chills down her spine. Elara's heart pounded. The wolf was injured, a deep gash along its side leaking a glowing, viscous liquid. Yet even in its weakened state, it was a predator, its growl a low rumble that vibrated through the ground beneath her feet. She tightened her grip on the knife, weighing her options. Running wasn't feasible, the terrain was too uneven, and the beast would easily outpace her. Fighting seemed suicidal. She took a deep breath and made a choice. Slowly, she crouched down, lowering her weapon to the ground. Her voice was steady but soft as she spoke, unsure if it understood her words but hoping it would sense her intention. "I'm not here to hurt you." The wolf's growl subsided slightly, its head tilting as if considering her. Elara carefully reached into her pack and pulled out her medkit. She showed it to the wolf, her movements deliberate and unthreatening. The creature's glowing eyes followed her every motion. Moving closer, she saw the extent of its injury. The metallic plating around the wound was scorched, and shards of what appeared to be alien glass were embedded in the flesh. It must have come from a fight, perhaps with another predator. Elara's fear warred with her curiosity as she began cleaning the wound. The wolf flinched but didn't retaliate, its growl softening to a low, rhythmic hum. For the first time since the crash, she felt a flicker of hope. Elara and the wolf moved cautiously through the alien wilderness, their uneasy truce growing into something resembling partnership. Each step forward revealed new challenges. The terrain was merciless, sharp rocks sliced at her boots, and the thick air forced her lungs to work harder. But the wolf proved invaluable, leading her to areas where the air felt slightly less oppressive and the ground more stable. Their communication was rudimentary but effective. The wolf would pause, glance back at her, and emit low guttural sounds that seemed almost deliberate. Elara began to mimic the sounds, testing their meaning through trial and error. A short bark often meant danger ahead, a soft whine signaled safety. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Food quickly became a pressing issue. The rations she'd salvaged wouldn't last long, and the alien environment offered little in the way of sustenance. Strange fruits hung from twisted vines, their surfaces glowing faintly, but Elara hesitated to eat them, unsure if they were poisonous. One evening, as hunger gnawed at her, the wolf returned from the shadows carrying a small, six-legged creature in its jaws. It dropped the catch at her feet and watched intently as she inspected it. With no other choice, she built a small fire and cooked the meat. The taste was acrid, but it was enough to keep her going. The wolf didn't eat alongside her. Instead, it sat nearby, its eyes scanning the horizon as if watching for threats. It seemed to understand its role as protector, and for that, Elara was grateful. When predators did appear, lithe, serpentine creatures with snapping jaws, the wolf dispatched them with brutal efficiency. Elara could only watch, awestruck by its raw power. But she didn't let herself grow complacent. She scavenged what she could from the wreckage of her ship, fashioning crude weapons and traps to defend herself. A sharpened metal rod became a makeshift spear, and a broken panel served as a shield. One night, as they rested in a hollow beneath a jagged overhang, Elara spoke aloud, her voice breaking the oppressive silence. "You're not just a beast, are you?" she asked, her gaze fixed on the wolf. "You're something more." The wolf tilted its head, its glowing eyes meeting hers. It didn't respond, of course, but there was something in its gaze, a depth that went beyond simple instinct. Elara found herself wondering where it had come from. Was it created? Born? Abandoned, like her? Over time, their trust deepened. The wolf allowed her to clean its wounds more thoroughly, even accepting the makeshift bandages she applied. In turn, it became her guide, leading her to a cavern where fresh water dripped from the ceiling into a shallow pool. It was a small miracle in an unforgiving world, and Elara couldn't help but smile. As they rested by the water, Elara felt a sense of quiet companionship. Alone, she might not have survived this long. But together they had a chance. The alien world was hostile, but it no longer felt insurmountable. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe they could endure. The first sign of the predator's presence was the silence. The alien wilderness, usually alive with distant hums and the faint rustle of movement, grew oppressively still. Elara and the wolf both froze, their senses heightened. She tightened her grip on the makeshift spear she carried, her heart hammering in her chest. Something was out there, something far more dangerous than anything they had encountered before. A low, mechanical growl echoed through the canyon ahead, sending a chill down her spine. The ground vibrated faintly as heavy, deliberate footsteps approached. From the shadows emerged a monstrous figure, towering twice the size of the wolf. Its body was a grotesque blend of organic and synthetic components, with jagged metal plating and pulsating veins of glowing, toxic green. Its face, if it could be called that, was a horrifying mask of sharp edges and glowing sensors that scanned the area with an unnerving precision. Elara's breath caught as the predator locked onto them. Its movements were methodical, each step exuding an aura of deadly purpose. The wolf stepped in front of her, growling low and deep, its fur bristling as it prepared to defend them both. Elara knew they couldn't face it head-on. This was an apex predator, built for killing. They needed a plan. Her mind raced as she observed the creature. Its movements were deliberate but not flawless. Its massive size made it slower, and its glowing veins suggested a possible vulnerability. She reached into her pack, retrieving the crude explosive device she had been assembling from salvaged ship parts. It wasn't much, just a mixture of volatile chemicals and a triggered ignition, but it might give them a chance. She whispered to the wolf, her voice trembling but resolute. "We have to lure it into a trap. I'll set this, but I need you to keep it distracted." The wolf glanced back at her, its red eyes narrowing in understanding. It crouched low, ready to move. Elara darted to the side, her boots skidding on loose gravel as she sprinted toward a narrow crevice in the rocks. The predator's head snapped toward her, and it unleashed a deafening roar, a sound that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. The wolf charged forward, its massive form colliding with the predator in a clash of metal and muscle. The two titans fought viciously, the wolf's claws raking against armored plating while the predator lashed out with bladed limbs. Elara worked quickly, planting the explosive near a cluster of unstable rock formations. If she could time it right, the blast would bring the whole structure down on the predator. Her fingers shook as she set the trigger, her ears ringing from the sounds of the battle behind her. The wolf let out a pained yelp as the predator landed a glancing blow, but it didn't falter. Instead, it redoubled its efforts, biting down on one of the predator's limbs and tearing it free with a metallic screech. Elara seized the moment, activating the explosive and shouting, "Get clear!" The wolf leapt back just as the explosion ripped through the canyon. Rocks tumbled, dust filled the air, and the predator let out a final guttural roar before it was buried beneath the debris. Elara and the wolf stood together, battered but alive, their bond forged stronger through the shared fight for survival. As the dust settled, Elara leaned heavily against a jagged rock, her chest heaving with exhaustion. Her arms ached, her legs felt like lead, and every breath was a struggle in the thin air. The wolf stood beside her, its fur matted with blood and the strange glowing fluid that seeped from its wounds. Despite its battered state, it remained upright, its glowing red eyes scanning the rubble to ensure the predator was truly defeated. Elara couldn't help but feel a wave of gratitude. Without the wolf, she wouldn't have survived the encounter. She reached out tentatively, her hand resting against the side of its massive head. "We did it," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. The wolf didn't pull away. Instead, it let out a low, rumbling sound that almost felt like approval. The victory, however, was short-lived. They were both injured, and the explosion had drained what little energy she had left. She needed a plan, not just to survive but to escape this planet. Sitting still wasn't an option. Using what tools remained in her pack, Elara began inspecting the distress beacon she had salvaged earlier. It was damaged in the crash but still functional enough to emit a weak signal. She worked methodically, stripping wires and reconnecting circuits while the wolf lay nearby, its massive frame resting but still alert. She talked aloud as she worked, her voice filling the otherwise oppressive silence. "This signal won't reach far, but maybe it's enough. Maybe someone will hear it." Her hands trembled as she tightened the final connection, the device emitting a faint but steady pulse. The wolf shifted, its ears twitching as it watched her. She looked over at it, a bittersweet smile tugging at her lips. "I don't know if I'll ever see home again, but if I do, I won't leave you behind. I promise." Time passed in tense silence, the faint ping of the beacon their only company. Elara couldn't be sure how long they had before the next threat emerged. This planet wasn't going to give them a reprieve. She fashioned crude splints for the wolf's injured leg, using strips of fabric from her own jacket to secure it. It let her work without protest, its eyes meeting hers with a quiet understanding. As the night fell, the stars above seemed impossibly vast, stretching endlessly across the alien sky. Elara lay beside the wolf, her back against the cold rock. For the first time since the crash, she felt a small glimmer of peace. They had faced impossible odds together and survived. It wasn't luck, it was trust, determination, and a bond that had grown stronger with each passing moment. A faint sound broke the stillness. It wasn't the ominous growl of a predator or the hum of the alien environment. It was a distant, rhythmic pulse, an approaching ship. Rescue. Elara's heart surged with hope, but she quickly turned to the wolf. Would they accept it? Would it follow her into the unknown? The wolf stood, towering over her, and let out a deep, resonant howl that seemed to shake the very air. Elara smiled, her decision already made. Whatever came next, they would face it together.